Hello, my name's Rosemary Collier. I'm a professor in the School of Life Sciences and I'm one of the academic leads for the Food Global Research Priority, or GRP for short. I've produced a short video summarising our research on sustainable crop production at Warwick with an emphasis on waste reduction. About 30 to 40% of food in both developed and developing countries is lost to waste. But the causes are very different. In developing countries, losses are mainly due to the lack of infrastructure in the food chain and lack of knowledge or investment in storage facilities on the farm. In developed countries, such as the UK, pre-retail losses are much lower, but losses at the retail, food service and home stages of the food chain are much greater. So I'm going to summarise some of the research that is undertaken in the School of Life Sciences and particularly at Warwick Crop Centre, which is based on the university's Wellesbourne campus. And I'm going to talk about the research that is focused on crop production. This relates mainly to the production of fresh produce, so vegetables, salads and ornamental crops such as flowers and pot plants. Many of our collaborations are with companies producing for supermarkets and other customers. And how a crop grows has impacts on waste in the field, so how much gets harvested, and it also has impacts on waste in the rest of the supply chain, for example the shelf life of something that you might buy. Waste at any point in the supply chain means a waste of the resources used to grow the crop. This could be water used to irrigate the crops, fertilisers applied to help the crop grow better, pest and disease control, any labour inputs into the crop, and the energy used to make the fertilisers and drive the tractors used to manage the crop. Wasted food means that there will be adverse environmental impacts for no gain. I'm going to talk about a couple of the approaches that we take to reducing waste during crop production. And the first is a focus on crop breeding. So we need crops that produce consistent yield and quality under challenging conditions. And this could be due to the impacts of climate change, so extreme drought or extreme rainfall, or to pests and disease infestations. The genetic resources needed to breed new crop varieties that can adapt to some of these conditions come from collections such as the UK Vegetable Gene Bank, which is hosted at Warwick's Wellesbourne campus. We undertake research to identify useful traits and the genes controlling them so that they can be bred into new crop varieties. Such traits include pest and disease resistance, resilience, drought tolerance. And we collaborate with the companies who will eventually sell the seed. All crops are susceptible to particular pests and diseases. These impair crop quality and reduce yield, leading to wastage of at least some of the crop that has been grown and of the resources used to grow it. At Warwick, we work on a number of approaches to pest and disease control. One of our aims is to maintain or improve crop yield and quality while reducing the amounts of synthetic pesticides that are applied. The range of research that we undertake on pests and diseases can be summarised using the term integrated pest management. And this is a decision-based process involving coordinated use of multiple tactics for optimising the control of pests in an ecologically and economically sound manner. On the right-hand side, you can see what we call the IPM pyramid, which summarises the different types of approaches that can be taken. So at the bottom of the pyramid, you have a range of agronomic practices such as crop rotation, use of resistant varieties, growing more than one crop species in the field, which has been shown on occasions to reduce the incidence of both pests and diseases, and the protection and enhancement of beneficials. The next layer of the pyramid is about decision support, and this involves development of monitoring, forecasting and warning systems to make growers and farmers aware of when a pest problem is occurring in their fields. Above that are mechanical, physical and natural approaches to control, and on the right hand side the image shows the use of fine mesh netting to exclude pests from a radish crop in eastern England. And then moving upwards we have biological control, which is the use of living organisms to assist in the management of pests and diseases. And then finally, if the combination of all the approaches below doesn't completely reduce the pest problem, then there is also the option to apply synthetic chemical pesticides in a highly regulated way. So much of this work is undertaken at the Wellesbourne campus at Warwick Crop Centre, which is about 15 miles south of the university, and just a few images here to show you our facilities. So we have laboratories, we have greenhouses, and we have fields where we can undertake field trials and other research. If you want to find out more about research on food at Warwick, then please visit these two websites. On the left hand side is the Warwick Crop Centre website, and on the right hand side is the website for the FoodGRP. And the FoodGRP covers the broad range of research undertaken on food within the university, and also publicises a range of other activities. So I hope you found this useful, and thank you for listening.
Good afternoon and welcome to this short overview of a new project called the Insectorial Revolution. My name is Rob Lillywhite and I am in the School of Life Sciences at the University of Warwick. So let's start at the beginning. We're here really to talk about food waste, and we all know it's a problem. Something like 1/3 of all the food produced for humans is actually wasted. So waste is absolutely insidious in society. It's always there, it's always present, but we rarely acknowledge it. We're getting better at admitting that we waste food, but it's not something we do easily. So what are we to do with all this food waste? So the first thing we should do, of course, is to reduce the amount we produce. So reduction is the main aim, but we all know from our own lives that it's actually quite difficult to achieve. Waste is almost inherent in the way that we live our lives, from the production stage through processing, through retail, through consumption stages. Particularly if you eat out, if we're ever allowed to do that again, we know that food waste is always there. So if we can't reduce it, we need to consider other options. And the main ones that are promoted are the reuse, the recycling, and the recovery of value from food waste. Now, food waste is actually quite a useful product. It can be processed into things like compost, or it can be digested to produce biomethane and digestate. So we can do things with it. But they are low value options. And what we'd really like to do is what's kind of termed industrial symbiosis, is to use food waste as the starting position in another industry. And we've been doing that for a long time, of course. So food waste can be fed to livestock. Now we've done this for the whole time we've produced food and had livestock. But in the last 10-15 years, it's become very difficult to do this, because hygiene concerns have become a real issue. And we certainly don't want to return to conditions of things like the foot and mouth disease. So what we want is a reusable option to use food waste as the basis for another industry. Which brings us to aquaculture. So the UK actually has quite a large aquaculture industry producing salmon and trout. Now, salmon are mainly raised on the west coast of Scotland, and trout are raised inland in fisheries. Whilst aquaculture is seen as a sustainable alternative to ocean caught fish, fish still need to be fed, and they need to be fed on the things that they would naturally eat. So most of the feedstuffs that are used in aquaculture are based on fish derived products. So the fish are raised using commercial fish feed containing fish meal and fish oils, which are derived from ocean caught fish. So we're still fishing the oceans at a huge scale to catch hundreds, millions of tons of little fishes, which we then process and feed to captured salmon and trout. So it is one step to sustainability, but from my perspective, there's still a big gap in that we are scavenging the oceans to catch fish, to process, to feed back to fish that are actually just contained in sea locks. So to me, there is a mismatch there. So not only is it a mismatch, of course, it is destroying the base of ocean food webs and is ecologically unsustainable. But we need more food, we need more fish. So we need to find alternative feedstocks to support this increase in aquaculture. And that really is the basis of what we're going to talk about. So I'm interested in insect protein. So insects are naturally very efficient converters of plant biomass into insect protein. That's been known for a long time. And now that we are, I won't say reaching the end of ecological reserves, but now we're thinking more sustainably about what we do, there is a far greater interest in using this process industrially. So can we raise insects at a huge scale, use them using food waste, and then use that protein as a direct substitute in human and animal diets and fish diets? And the answer is yes, we can. So we've already got pilot plants established, certainly all over Europe, and there are some in Africa and some in Asia. Different scales, different productivity, different insects. But insect farms are starting to be established globally, with the insects being fed on a range of feedstuffs, including wasted food. And this is where, of course, it starts to get interesting, because this is a good example of using the circular economy, industrial symbiosis, to reduce environmental impact. So we can take the food waste, we can feed it to insects, we can produce insect protein, which we can then use to feed fish to bring that back into the human food chain. And there are big ecological savings and financial savings, we hope, in order of this sort of process. So what are we doing? We're going to use black soldier fly. This is a popular choice of insect due to its very rapid production cycle and high concentration of protein. So once the flies have laid eggs, those eggs obviously turn into larvae, and they actually reach their maximum body mass in about 6 days. And you can see an example on the right hand side of somebody holding a whole mixture of insects. And at harvest, these larvae contain between about 40 and 65% protein. So they're a very rich source of protein. So this is a very efficient way of converting food waste into insect protein. And then we dry the larvae, obviously killing them in the process, and we process this into insect meal. And this can be used as an additive straight into feed for aquaculture. And the residue, so once we've taken out the protein, we still have a residue, so bits of feed stuff, bits of exoskeleton, bits of insect manure, and that's called frass. And this we can use as a fertilizer. So we get a double benefit in that we can use the residues, put it back to land as a fertilizer to grow crops. So there are a lot of wins from this particular approach. So what is the insectial revolution? Great name. So this is a UK based consortium led by a company called Entocycle, who are the people who actually grow the insects, and it's funded by a national funder called Innovate UK. And what we're doing and planning to expand on doing is to raise black soldier fly on food waste to produce insect protein. And this insect protein will then be used to substitute for fish-based protein used in UK aquaculture. So overall, we have a triple environmental win. We are using food waste, which would otherwise go to lower value alternatives and disposal. We are reducing the fishing of ecological important species just to land it and feed it back to fish. And we are going to reduce the use of synthetic fertilizers. So that in a nutshell is the insectial revolution. Take food waste, which we would ultimately dispose of, feed it to insects, which are really pretty easy to use, produce a high protein feed, and then feed it back to fish to feed us. So a nice circular kind of economy project using waste, generating a product. Thank you very much. If you would like further information, please email me.